that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. This was the way that Abraham Lincoln, this guy, chose to close out his Gettysburg Address, now considered to be the greatest speech in American history. But I wonder whether or not government of the people, by the people, and for the people is really all it's cracked up to be. Now, I know that's a radical notion because we've grown up as a society for several generations now under a democratic government. We believe, because we've been told when we've gone to as early as elementary school, that democracy is the greatest government ever invented by the mind of man. It's the greatest system in world history. But is that really the case, just because we've been taught it? The two main reasons behind why people believe democracy is the best system of government is because they believe it's just, and they believe it's the best type of government. It works better than any other type of government. I don't think that those two claims really hold up to the evidence. People believe that we have a right to vote, that we have a right to have, as an entire people, control over our public institutions, but is that really produce justice or efficiency? Just focusing on the justice aspect for a second, there's no reason to believe that just because something is popular or the majority supports it, that it's the right thing to do, that it's moral or ethical. Just looking at our own history as a country, we started out as the first sovereign democracy on the planet. And 1/3 of our population, when we started out, was slaves. Just because the majority, 2/3 of the population, believed that because of the color of the skin of the other third, that they didn't deserve equal human rights to the rest of us, mainly white Protestant males at the time. So once again, we have an example of the majority not jiving with ethics or justice. And you go through our entire history, and you see slavery, you see genocide of Native Americans, you see oppression of women, Jim Crow laws, the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. All of these situations where the majority was just wrong and the majority was not giving justice to the minority. So why would these people think democracy was working in their best interests? We've gotten better on a lot of these, but even today we have situations where, people are being thrown in prison for possessing a plant that they want to smoke. That's another example of the majority oppressing the minority using democracy. It's completely democratic the way it's done, but there's no guarantee of justice. There's no ethics inherent in it. And even outside of our own country, in 1930s Germany, they were a democracy, and they chose to vote this guy into power. So it's not really that great of a system if you can have someone like him come to power. And I think, looking at entertainment even, in the classic film The Dark Knight, at the end of the film, I'm sure everyone's seen it, the Joker puts bombs in two boats that are trying to escape Gotham. One of them has prisoners, the other one has civilians, and the Joker basically gives them a choice. They either blow the other ship up, or they both get blown up by the Joker. Well, the one ship with the civilians actually holds a vote, an election on it, and the majority says, yeah, go ahead and blow the other guys up. But nobody on the boat would actually do it because they knew it wasn't justice, it wasn't ethical. So democracy sort of pushes off your own personal ethical responsibility onto this system, the nameless system, but the fact that the majority supports it does not mean that it's ethical or just. And even Thomas Jefferson, the guy who's considered the architect of our democracy in America, this guy, for those who don't know, he said this in his autobiography: democracy is nothing more than mob rule, where 51% may take away the rights of the other 49%. That's Thomas Jefferson. So I think we can pretty much conclude that justice and democracy does not necessarily go hand in hand. In fact, for the most part, it seems to be kind of the opposite. But now, what about efficiency? Is democracy really the most competent form of government? I would say no. And as H.L. Mencken said, that's this guy, democracy is a pathetic belief in the collective wisdom of individual ignorance. The majority of people are not that intelligent on the majority of issues. Most people are apathetic. Not even the majority of people in this country vote, for better or worse. But imagine if they all were required to vote. Most of them are not that smart. They don't understand the problems that we have. They're not paying attention. They're paying attention to their own life. They might be smart in their own, personal corner, their job. But do they really know how to run a country? Should they really decide who gets to decide how to run the country? Is that how we should decide things as a society? A Pew Research poll just 2 years ago, I think it was 2012, said that 46% of Americans still did not believe that climate change was happening. How do you have a form of government, an intelligent form of government, when people are not informed? When the majority of people believe something that's just patently false, and they vote and base their decisions off of this. And if you need any further evidence that people aren't really smart in a democracy, just realize that this lady was one John McCain heart attack away, could have been one John McCain heart attack away, from being the most powerful person on the planet. Do you really feel that safe about democracy now? I would hope not. But ultimately there's no IQ test for voting, and even if we did have an IQ test for voting to make sure that it was, competent people running the country, it wouldn't really be a democracy at that point because the majority probably wouldn't pass it. And another issue with democracy is that people, especially in Western capitalistic countries, have become entitled. We believe that we're entitled to a certain standard of living where, the other 95% of the world, are starving to death, but we think we're entitled to a certain standard of living. Well, we can just use our power of voting, of democracy, to just vote ourselves stuff. We get privileges, we get, all kinds of money from the government, bailouts. We can do this, and yet it comes at a huge cost. We are like $16-17 trillion in debt, maybe even more at this point, because people can just vote themselves money from the government, and we just go further and further into debt. So not only is it not an intelligent way to run a society, it also is unsustainable, because eventually you're just going to run out of money to sustain this sense of entitlement. So once again, we see another flaw in the democratic process. So in conclusion, I would say that all of the arguments in favor of democracy don't really hold that much water. It's not a just system inherently. It's not inherently a wise system, and it actually can lead to bankruptcy. So I think the idea that democracy is somehow special, that it's the greatest system ever devised by the mind of man, is just something that we've told ourselves to make ourselves feel better about our system of government as we have it now. It's something we've been taught and indoctrinated. But ultimately, I think that government by the people, for the people, and of the people, maybe we should let it perish. And even if not, it's definitely not the best system out there. But I would argue that maybe we should think of something else, because this system really isn't working out that well. Thanks.